So, you've got a stellar guitar riff and you want it to sound like an elephant playing the tuba in a subway tunnel. I'm gonna show you the trick that I use to make my guitars sound like this. There are three things that we need to do to make our riff as heavy as a Boeing 747 with a dump truck in the back. First is to quad track the guitar riff. All this means is that you'll be playing the same part 4 times. It's important to try to get the 4 takes as tight as possible. If they're too sloppy, they can congeal into an untidy mess that sounds like you left a Hot Pocket in the microwave for too long. Then we amp each take using a different guitar tone. I'm using a Marshall JCM 800, which is a super mid-range rock and roll kind of amp. A clone of my Fender Blues Jr., which is a bit cleaner and has some more high-end clarity. These 2 amps are panned hard left and right. Third is a Mesa Boogie triple rectifier, which is a highly distorted metal amp with scooped mids. And finally, what I like to call the super grunge tone, which is a clean amp that is being destroyed by a fuzz pedal that gives it a really nasty tone. These 2 are panned 50% left and right to fill up the stereo field. This is a pretty good start, but we still have a lot of work to do if we want to make it sound like that dump truck just rolled out the back of the 747 and is hurtling towards the earth. The second thing we need to focus on is bass. The weight from any riff comes from the low-end information, and I think it's important that we have the bass guitar reinforce the riff. While the bass and guitar can and should be playing different things throughout your song, if you want to have a riff that hits as hard as possible, I think that you should have the bass play the exact same thing as the guitar, just an octave lower. That way the sonic field is filled top to bottom with nothing but the riff, like a titanium tuna fish sandwich. Here's what it would sound like if the bass was playing a harmony instead of the root notes. It's cool, but I feel like it makes the riff less impactful when you're going for a wall of sound kind of approach. The idea is to bury people in guitars here. Our riff is almost there, but there's still one thing we need to do that I would argue is actually the most important thing to do for your riff if you want it to sound like that dump truck just careened out of the sky and smashed into a 50,000 watt sound system. And that is dynamics. Our ears are designed in such a way that quiet sounds draw us in, meaning that when a quiet sound is followed up by the crushing explosion of guitar pummeled speakers, our brains perceive the dynamic shift as louder than it actually is. Think of it like how they take away all the sound in a horror movie right before the big jump scare. In this example, I go from a small mid-range mono sound to the stereo field being overwhelmed with all of the instruments coming in together. If the part before the riff had the same dynamic level, the riff wouldn't have nearly as much impact. So no matter how many guitars you track or how low your bass is tuned, your riff will never crush a human being into spaghetti like the center of a black hole without a big dynamic shift. So, to recap, if you want your guitars to sound like the sun imploding and wiping out all life as we know it, quad track your guitars through 4 different amps, have the bass play the riff an octave lower, and have a quiet part play before the riff to create a large dynamic shift. But if you're still trying to figure out how to find the perfect guitar tone, then you need to watch this video where I show you how to get a stellar punk rock tone using nothing but free plugins.